Hey, this is Andrew Aversa, and today I want to show you another video of Shreddage 2 Absolute Electric Guitar by Impact Soundworks. In the first video, which is available on this YouTube channel, I just did a little bit of an overview of the interface as well as how you can use the library, and now I just want to go into more depth and show some of the other features that we have in this instrument. One of the first things I want to do is talk about the lead playing possibilities of Shreddage 2. So just as an example, I'm going to play, this is live from my MIDI keyboard, just a series of notes with hammer-ons and pull-offs. So that's just basic playing on a MIDI keyboard. There's no sequencing, no effects going on. And what I want to do is break down some of the things you can add and some of the things you can do to get a more realistic performance. The first thing is you might want to use the monophonic mode of Shreddage 2. So that's me holding down those four notes. Okay, so that's monophonic mode. It makes life a little bit easier so you don't get some of that blur in between notes, although you might want that, kind of depends. Now you can see I have a double tracking setup here, DT guitar 1 and 2, same MIDI channel, different outputs. I have a revolver here on the left, just using a factory preset. And on the right, I have a custom guitar rig patch. It's pretty simple, just the Van 51 amp going into an ultrasonic matched cab. And then you might actually want to put a screamer pedal before that. Some of the things that a real guitarist does that you want to emulate in your playing is pitch bends. So you might want to do that when you're about to hit a high note. And you always want to bend upwards first, so you wouldn't do something like this. Let's see, You might want to do something like this instead, Real guitarists bend all the time when they play, Even adding just a little bit of bending to some notes can add a lot of realism, especially if you're playing some of the lower notes as opposed to the higher ones. It really depends, but for example, all I'm doing there is just adding a little bit of pitch bending to some of those notes. So instead of a straight rhythm like this, we can do... It's a subtle difference, but it adds a lot. It's just something that you can do, a little bit of pitch bend. I would recommend playing it in, not sequencing it. In most cases, I think you can sequence just about anything, but basically use that pitch wheel. It'll definitely help your stuff sound better. So another feature that we have here in Shreddage 2 is the extra pick noise. Once extra pick is enabled, you're gonna get that at higher velocities by default. Now for this demonstration, I'm actually gonna turn this up to 100 minimum velocity instead of 80 to better show the difference between with and without. So here we go. So that's just kind of standard playing. But then if we hit the high note, there's a little bit more of attack versus... So having that extra attack is really nice when you're sequencing an expressive lead part. Just for fun, let's throw on a reverb and a little bit of delay. And this is the kind of thing I did for my Quarters of Time demo. 2. So again, having the extra pick noise in there is helpful in adding some articulation to specific notes that you want to emphasize. And when you're sequencing, it actually is even easier to do. This is with the extra pick, and then without. So having a velocity editor, of course, will give you even more control. Now you can hear the hammer-ons and pull-offs is enabled by default. I definitely recommend keeping that on. So without that, and let me just dial down the effects here. Not quite as realistic, so you'll definitely want to keep those on in general. We talked about the portamento a little bit in the previous video. And again, that's useful for lead playing, like... So just by hitting that lower note briefly once, you'll get that next slide effect, which is great, you know. So okay, that's just a few things that you can do. You know, you have your neck slides, pitch bends manually. You can also do vibrato, I might add, with the pitch wheel, because sometimes the pre-recorded vibrato like this, or, you know, this, that might not be the right speed, or you might only want to do it briefly, so, you know, you could do this instead. That's just manually moving the pitch wheel. It's very simple to do, you know. And it's subtle, so, you know, just pushing up ever so slightly a little bit as you're playing. I'm not personally much of a keyboardist myself, so if I can do it, you can definitely do it as well. Now, what if you're sequencing? You know, of course, a lot of people are using Shreddage 2 with a program like FL Studio, Cubase, Sonar, Reaper, Pro Tools, what have you. Let's sequence just a basic melody. How about the Next Generation theme? This is how I would approach it. I'm going to move the mixer off for now. So instead of hammer-ons here, I'm going to use actually a new pick on those notes. And now I'll make these into hammer-ons quickly, just extend those over a bit. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. What are some of the things that we can do to this, though? So let's add a little bit of manual vibrato. Make sure automation recording is on. So a little bit of pitch wheel automation, nothing special. Next up, how about a little bit of mod wheel? Okay, now instead of playing in the mod wheel, I'm going to actually draw it in here. So let's say start it at basically 0, and then just have a max vibrato on that note. And then again on this note. Kind of keep it simple. Now, if you don't like the tone of that vibrato, of course, Shreddage 2 has multiple vibrato types. So we might say, instead of the fingered vibrato, which can sound very heavy and noisy, let's try the light. Or the whammy style. We can also turn up the release noises to add a little bit of extra, fuzz between notes, and let's also turn on anti-repetition. And now, how about an extra portamento neck slide? Put that in there, make sure that's at a lower velocity. Maybe something like this. And we'll just do that briefly, because we don't want it to hold out. Maybe put it a little bit more like here instead. A little bit too late. So some of this is a bit of trial and error with your sequence. Then we can try, different combinations of mutes as well. Maybe shorten these, play them, with tighter mutes here. Okay, so that's just the simple little example. Again, not going into the amp tone really, and not going into even further editing that you could do in terms of note positions. This is just very quantized, but I think it sounds pretty good. One last thing I want to show is how you can use layering of guitar and bass to get an even fatter and thicker sound. Some of the demos that people really like on the Shreddage 2 SoundCloud actually get that thick low-end sound, not just from the guitars, but also layering in a powerful metal bass kind of sound. So just as an example, I've created a simple riff here. So here we have the aggressive EQ presets here, and then for the guitar EQ, it's basically flat, just Revolver and Guitar Rig 5. Now adding in the bass, let's check that out. And of course, this is Shreddage bass. Just a little bit of extra EQ there in the low and presence, but no other effects. You could add, for example, amp and compression, but I actually like it clean for the presence without taking up too much of that high range. So that's just a simple tip. You can use that, of course, in just about any genre, but particularly for rock and metal. Anyway, hope you got something out of this video. I hope you're enjoying Shreddage 2. It's on sale for the rest of December 2012 for $119 before it goes back up to the list price of $139. Of course, if you bought the original Shreddage, you're entitled to a $99 upgrade for the rest of your life, so enjoy that. Anyway, this is Andrew Aversa for Impact Soundworks, and enjoy the holidays.